Hey everyone, so far most of my videos have been life updates and kind of sharing with you guys how we're doing here and kind of progress reports on our lives here. This video is going to be a little bit different. So I've been learning a lot. The Lord's been teaching me a lot of life lessons here in Sierra Leone, and I've been trying my best to write those things down, to document those lessons. But this one I felt really compelled to share with you guys, and so maybe I'll do a few of these videos every now and again just to kind of give you guys an idea of some of the things that I'm learning, the Lord's teaching me here. This first video is going to be about contentment. Being discontent has been responsible for my lowest points here in Sierra Leone. The times where I've felt the worst, the times that I've been the lowest, it's all been because I've been discontent. And so I want to share a little bit about kind of what are some of the things that have gone on that have helped me work through this, as well as some scriptures that have been really edifying to me in this area. First of all, I want to share Philippians 4 verse 13. This is one of the most commonly quoted scriptures in the Bible. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And certainly that's applicable to like any struggle that we would go through. But I think it's so interesting that Paul attaches that sentiment, that statement, when he is talking about achieving contentment. And I think that means that contentment's a really difficult thing to attain. In fact, Paul would say he requires the strength that only God, only Christ can supply in order to attain contentment. And so I've really experienced that here. Contentment's been really hard, really tough for me. And so I'll share a few things that have been difficult for me to have a content attitude towards. And I feel so insecure about sharing these things with you, really, to be honest. Even my worst day as far as conditions go in Sierra Leone has been better than the best day of most of my neighbors and the people around me here. But all the same, things like, you know, when I'm going to bed and I'm wanting to take a nice shower before going to bed, get cleaned up. I get so sweaty during the day, and I turn the knob and there's no water. And that happening on consecutive days is just kind of heartbreaking to me, unfortunately. There have been times where in the evenings, again, I'm looking forward to going to bed. I feel like I'm done with the day. I feel like I've just done so much. And then I get into the bathroom, and for 3 consecutive days, I discovered leaks in all the plumbing. And so there's all this dirty, filthy water on the floor of my bathroom. That just, so frustrating. There have been times where I've just been really hungry, and I've looked forward to having some bread or some fruit, and I open that plastic bag and there's just bugs and maggots and ants all over the food. I just get so frustrated. We were told that when we moved into this house that we would average about 6 hours of electricity per day. And that's less than what we're used to in the States, so we kind of, lowered our expectation down to that amount. But then we only had a few hours power for 2 days during the first 8 days that we lived here. And that was just really hard. We couldn't power fans and lights and things like this, and so it became really difficult to feel content and to be content in those situations. And then there's just super small stuff, like when I'm looking for a particular item, but it's in my suitcase or in one of my 4 suitcases, and I just can't remember which suitcase that I put it in, and each suitcase has been packed and unpacked at least a dozen times, and I'm looking for this small item and I can't find it, and I'm looking for what seems like an hour looking for this thing. These are the times that I've really struggled to be content like I ought to have been. So it's during those times that I've been able to look back upon 1 Timothy chapter 6. And verse 8's really been an anthem of mine. I've been repeating this phrase to myself again and again. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. Even on my worst day here in Sierra Leone, I've still had food and I've still had covering. So I've never experienced an environment or situation in my life where I've only had those things. However, I've never lived so close to only having these things as what I am currently here in Sierra Leone. But even with that being the case, contentment is still achievable, this verse tells me. So I keep telling myself, whenever things go bad, whenever things, aren't working out the way I want them to, with food and with covering, with these I'll be content. Skipping down a few verses in this text to verse number 10, Paul tells us what is the fate of those who are unable to attain contentment with simply food and covering. He says, "For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." There's so many things I could say about this, but being unable to be content with just food and covering, this results in piercing ourselves with many griefs. In other words, if we are unable to be content with just these very essential things, then we're inviting a life of misery to accompany us. And that's certainly been the case for me. My most miserable moments here in Sierra Leone have been in times where I've had food and covering, but I've not been content with food and covering. So I want to end with a verse that's really helped me shape my attitude towards my contentment. That's in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5. The Hebrew writer says, "Make sure that your character is free from the love of money, being content with what you have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you." So this verse taught me something. That contentment is not dependent upon what I have around me, but by who I have around me. That I would be content in whatever situation I'm in, no matter what I have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. The presence of God in my life is all that I need in order to be content, because I know he will provide for my needs. It is when we focus upon and learn to value the presence of God in our lives that I'll be able to find contentment in the various situations I find myself in. I'm still learning these lessons. I'm still struggling with it. There are times in every day where things aren't the way I want it to be, but these scriptures and these experiences are really helping me. So I just hope and pray that all of us can achieve a greater level of contentment in our life as we learn to value the presence and the care and the provision of the Lord.